It is now the eve of another West Virginia football game. The Mountaineers, now coming off a bye week, travel to Cincinnati to take on the Cincinnati Bearcats in a winnable game, but a game against a similar team based on how this season has been so far. Arguably, Cincinnati's actually had a better year and a year that's achieved a little bit more in terms of their expectations than West Virginia, who's disappointed to this point. And I'm going to talk about how Cincinnati has maybe overachieved what nationally people thought this program would do, why West Virginia has not, and who we think is going to come out on top in this matchup. West Virginia did win in Morgantown pretty comfortably a year ago, as Cincinnati now a part of the Big 12, but we will see what happens this year. And a big deal to both of these programs. Mike Asti here with WV Sports Now. We are live for this one on eve of a game. If you are listening to this after the fact on the podcast, this is a live broadcast. And I am going to be joined by Neil Meyer, who covers the Bearcats right there, boots on the ground in Cincinnati with Front Office News, the now Cincinnati Rivals site. So, Neil, man, thanks for jumping aboard semi kind of last minute. How are you? I'm going to be seeing you tomorrow. So how you doing?
Good. How are you? First off, Mike, thanks for having me on. I know it's been a busy week for those. You have a busy drive ahead of you tomorrow morning, but definitely appreciate you for taking the time and having us on.
Yeah, no problem, man. Yeah, it's not going to be too bad of a trip, but yeah, it's going to be an early wake up. And I am doing the whole day trip thing. So early wake up, cover the game, post games where most of the coverage obviously is, and then try to get back at some semblance of a reasonable hour afterwards. But the noon kickoff makes that possible. So a noon kickoff between West Virginia and Cincinnati. I'm going to pick up some Skyline chili there probably in the middle of that drive at some point, as the Bearcats have the better record, both similar, both same record in conference play, but the Bearcats have the better overall mark right now. They both have a common out-of-conference opponent, both blowing a game to Pitt that I think still probably gets in the mind of both programs, and a game that the winner of this game is very much going to be in the Big 12 race, as insane as that sounds, where the loser probably is going to go off the graphic there pretty soon. Neil, before we kind of unpack this matchup and keys to this game, for people that thought Cincinnati, because the Big 12 media poll even suggests this, for people that thought Cincinnati was going to have another struggling season, that was once again going to kind of need to get their footing in the Big 12 and struggle to do so, and was not going to compete this year, and like last year would be an afterthought and barely make a bowl game. How has Cincinnati been able to have a better than expected season, to be a win away from bowl eligibility already, to have a season that they are a Big 12 contender, despite arguably blowing earlier season games that could even have made this a better year? They've been competitive and then some. How have they been doing it? And is this near your expectations? Because nationally, people didn't think Cincinnati would contend this year.
Yeah, so overall, I mean, Mike, heading into the season after the schedule was announced and after fall camp in the summer, I went on the record on our Bearcat Blitz show and I said this is a team that could realistically finish 7-5 or 6-6 on the season. Okay. But here we are, just a couple of weeks out at the beginning of November, and they're sitting at 5-3 overall. Obviously, a game overall versus Pitt, like you mentioned, should have been in the favor of the Bearcats, but Pitt is a really good team. Obviously, West Virginia knows them as well from the backyard brawl, but overall, I mean, that's a game you wish you could get back if you're Cincinnati. It's the Pitt game, and obviously, you go on the road at Texas Tech and you put up 40 points on the road at Texas Tech in your first true road game of the season. So overall, they are really, really exceeding expectations, and I think the biggest thing why, Mike, was you look at it, they hit in the transfer portal this offseason. Okay. I think you look down, 7 or 8 key contributors on the defensive side of the ball, at least, have all been the transfer portal. I mean, you bring in Jared Bartlett, who West Virginia guys are very familiar with, and he has had a monster season. Joe Royer has looked phenomenal at tight end. Brendan Sorsby has been exceeding expectations. Josh Minkins in the secondary. The list goes on. And Cincinnati really did a great job hitting the transfer portal. You can't forget Jake Golday at linebacker as well from the FCS level. So what they did this offseason, Mike, was they really hit the transfer portal hard. 48 newcomers on this team heading into the season between the transfer portal and the high school ranks.
That's a lot. That's a lot then, yeah.
They went a complete roster rebuild from a season ago. And I mean, you saw the guys and the talent that left Cincinnati from last season. Yeah. A couple of them headed down to UCF. One is now no longer with the Knights down there in Orlando. Deshaun Pace is still having a fantastic year. Miles Montgomery's banged up a little bit down there, but still having some success down in Orlando. But overall, this staff has really done a great job hitting in the transfer portal. But I think the biggest reason for success, Mike, on the offensive side of the ball is a veteran offensive line with a very good signal caller with plenty of experience that has the Big Ten experience. And Brendan Sorsby's looked to par, even better than par for what people have really gotten to take a look at. Obviously, he's struggled over the last few weeks, but, man, he was off to an excellent start at the beginning of the season. So, overall, I think they're just composed. They're connected. And I think that's the difference from last season to this season. Last season, after, I would say, the second half of the Pitt game, you could kind of feel where things could turn for the worst or things could turn for the best as a whole.
Yeah.
And obviously, you saw how it turned out. You go 1-8 or 1-7 in conference play, with your only win being at a struggling Houston team.
Yeah, I remember leading even into the West Virginia game. I was on your show, and you guys gave Cincinnati no chance in that game. And that was a season that West Virginia was not supposed to win, and they obviously ended up with 9 wins and a bowl game. But it seemed like dire straits at that point, that it was almost going through the motions, even covering the program. And then now, obviously, a complete 180.
Yeah, the environment from last year to this year is completely different. And I think you can see that between the players, the coaching staff. Everybody's bought into what Coach Satterfield is doing. And, I mean, you look at it, what he's doing right now. I mean, guys, Joe Royer is a potential NFL draft prospect this year with what he is doing. You have an offensive line where you have 3 guys that might find their way onto NFL teams or practice squads next year. You never know. But then you have an All-American returning on the defensive line with Dante Corleone, who had so much uncertainty heading into the season. And I'll say this, there's one person who has spearheaded this charge in this rebuild, and it's Dante Corleone. He has been bought in with Coach Sat since the hire was official back in December of 2022. So overall, Dante could have left last year. Everybody knew that. But he's came back and he's led this defense more than ever, despite going through all the injuries alongside him and the off-the-field issue that he went through as well. But this is a more collective, connective group, and it's a group that you can kind of feel they all get along with each other. They're more connected. It's a fun group to cover. It really is. And to see them have now the opportunity to clinch a bowl game on Saturday, coming off of what they went through last year, 3-9 on the season, a lot of uncertainty, and then you come back just 1 year later and find yourself not only in position for a bowl game, but in the midst of a Big 12 conference tournament or conference championship race as well.
Yeah, Neil Meyer here of Front Office News. Joining me on WV Sports Now is Mountaineer Report as we are previewing West Virginia at Cincinnati. And yeah, the Bearcats win and they clinch bowl eligibility, and over-under win total nationally was already below that. So yeah, they've exceeded expectations. Now, the interesting thing you mentioned is the group being together and Corleone being back and being part of that and being on the field, even though not able to necessarily be what he was initially, is a big part of that. If he's bought in, whether he's 100% or not, everyone else is going to be bought in. But you also mentioned that it felt like the team in camp was going to be better than expected. Maybe they're going to take advantage of a schedule and could be a bowl team at minimum. And then you blow the game against Pitt. And then it felt like the wheels maybe could fall off in terms of the vibe. A culturally weak program after you blow that game could totally collapse, and that could be another 3-9 season. What was the vibe after the Pitt game was blown? And then how do you think the team was able to regroup and have that just kind of be a blip on the radar? We're discussing it as if Cincinnati would have won that game, they would maybe be able to argue for ranks at some point based on how the season continues. They didn't win it. It's probably not going to happen in the top 25 for them, but that could have ruined the year because that was a game that I'm sure they still think in their mind, there's no way. It's West Virginia blew a 10-point lead. They blew what, a 20 plus?
21.
Like 21. Yeah, that even has to sting more, even though it's not as much of a rivalry. How did they not let that ruin a year?
I think the biggest thing was they went through that same experience last year versus Miami. I mean, you saw how that Miami game kind of spiraled there. Once they lost to Miami last season in overtime, that was kind of the downward spiral, and they made sure not to let that happen this year. And you got to give credit to where credit's due there, not only with the coaching staff, but veterans up front. Gavin Gerhardt and Luke Kandra really kind of spearheaded the momentum of getting the right mindset heading into because the following week this year after the Pitt game was Miami. So they knew they had to get right back in track to avoid what happened last year and not let it happen again, essentially, because if that would have week 2 was the game last year where they fell to Miami, and that's when the season started kind of going downward, but they did not want that to happen. They handled business well throughout the week. They regrouped on Sunday and knew right then and there that they had to go on the road to Miami to get the victory bell back, and they did that. So they regrouped very well, but overall, that's when that connective group really came, and you saw the adversity they had to deal with, and overall, they handled the adversity very well. I mean, you come back out, now you're sitting 5-3 in the first week of November, or second week of November following a bye week with a gauntlet of a schedule ahead of you. But essentially, UC can control their own destiny if they take care of business on Saturday.
Yeah, that's the theme. That's the same theme that Neil Brown's trying to sell, because conversely, as you've noticed, West Virginia has not really handled adversity all that well. Now, some could argue, if you want to be glass half full, that they have been able to get big wins via the scoreboard, even against struggling teams like Oklahoma State and Arizona, who they beat up on when they had their backs against the wall. But you blow the brawl and then don't show up in other big games against Iowa State, Kansas State, and obviously Penn State to open up the season. So that's already the losses right there. And it's a 4-4 season for West Virginia. But they also feel like that they have an easier stretch to end this season. They have favorable games to end the year that they could go on a roll and win those 4 in a row. And then if Iowa State and Kansas State lose again, because they've now proven to be vulnerable, they could crawl in there as a 2 seed. They don't play BYU this year, and then you never know. And you do mention that Cincinnati kind of has the opposite schedule situation where maybe it could trip them up here down the stretch. So we will see what happens, but a lot on the line for both of these two teams. Again, Neil Meyer here joining me, front office news and rivals here on WV Sports Now, as we're doing it live here the day before the game, and we are previewing West Virginia at Cincinnati. You mentioned Bartlett, obviously a former Mountaineer, and I will tell you, the news of that situation kind of even started unraveling literally as we're sitting there waiting to talk to the players and coaches after the Duke's Mayo Bowl. He had been there a long time. There was some misinformation on whether he's screwing the program or whether they're kind of, mutually parting ways. And it ended up being, there was kind of a mutual parting of ways. The program, the coaches, the players, they all sing his praises still, and they've been throughout this week. But most in media and fans, I believe, were thinking, okay, he was kind of an underrated, solid player. He wasn't the star at West Virginia, but he was an underrated, solid player. Go get your bag, end your eligibility, get your bag. The bag wasn't going to happen at West Virginia because they were bringing in major conference transfer players, and then let that be it, and it wouldn't, hurt his situation at WVU from, post-career type of situation. But he's, I think, play better than anybody would have thought. If he was going to play like this, I think the Mountaineers would have loved to maybe give him the bag and have him stay and finish out his time at WVU. I don't think fans thought he'd be doing this too. Exactly how good has Bartlett been, and how important has he been to this team outside of reading the box score? And has there been anything from him of extra motivation in this game to kind of show something to West Virginia that, okay, we mutually parted ways, but you didn't want to give me a raise. You wanted to give it to other players. You should have paid it to me, because I still could have done this for one more year for you.
Yeah, no, most certainly. Jared Bartlett has been a huge part to the Cincinnati defense, because obviously their goal was for him to be at linebacker, but with the injury bugs that have happened to Cincinnati, they lost big-time transfer Micah Coleman from Eastern Michigan, the 6'5" defensive end. In the summer, he suffered a torn Achilles, so he was out immediately. And then backup nose tackle Jalen Hunt tore a meniscus in fall camp. So then obviously that kind of threw a wrench in Tyson Vite's plans for Jared Bartlett. Obviously they have to find ways to get him and use him in multiple different ways. And the way that he's been very efficient, Mike, has been when they bring him off the edge or bring him on a blitz and he can get after the quarterback. And when he gets to the quarterback, he's making sure to lay a hit or lay some pressure there. He's a big guy, 6'4", 230 pounds. And people forget, he can move too. He's pretty quick for a linebacker that size, but he's been fantastic for Cincinnati, especially playing alongside Jake Golday. I think those two guys have really good lateral and vertical movement that you can do multiple different things with them. You can bring them on a rush. You can bring them off the edge. You can drop them into coverage, but that's what makes those guys so so efficient in this defense. But Jared Bartlett is one of the key contributors and the key pieces to this defense. And we've seen that this year. But obviously, heading into this week, I didn't get the chance to talk to him. I know Coach Satterfield in his press conference said they haven't had the chance to talk to him about the simple conversations of, hey, don't lose your composure come Saturday, because everybody knows how these guys can go when they get the opportunity to play their former team. But I don't know. Jared Bartlett's kind of a quiet guy for what we have had. He's a pretty quiet guy. He's all about business. So a very smart guy. So I think on Saturday he's going to have a big game for Cincinnati.
Yeah, he is kind of a quiet guy. I wouldn't have expected him to go out there in a press conference and say, I want to stick it to them or anything. And they did leave
on mutual terms.
Yeah, on mutual terms in a positive relationship. So, and this happens in college sports today, that you kind of max out what you want to give a guy, and once you graduate, he was at W for many years, you just mutually move on. But he is already on pace to have, right now, statistically speaking at least, his literal best season of his entire college career, and that includes 5 years at WVU. He had 49 total tackles in 2023 that resulted in a 9-win bowl win season. He has 42 right now with Cincinnati, and there are several games left to go. 3 pass deflections. He's never had more than one in a single year in his entire college career. 5.5 sacks. That is already more than he's ever had in a single season his entire college career. His other high was the year before, last year, at 4.5, and no other year did he get over 4. He's absolutely proven a point. He doesn't need to get out there in the press conference and say anything. He's proven a point that, hey, I'm better than anyone else you were going to, bring in terms of production, and maybe we could have stayed the course here. He also kind of maybe just wanted to move on. That was part of it too from his camp, but he's having his best year, and I'm sure there's extra motivation, but I do know from Neil Brown, at least, he does try to maybe in these situations not have the guy talk to the media, not have them lead a meeting or saying like, this is their plays, all the pressure's on me, I'm going to do this for you. Because as you're kind of alluding to, that could spell disaster, where they're kind of pressing and they're worrying about it, and they're not sleeping tonight because the win is not even the most important thing. They feel like they got to get numbers, or they're going to get text messages from the other side. I'm sure Cincinnati's trying to calm that down, but I'm also sure that if Bartlett gets a sack or recovers a fumble or something in this game, he's going to go berserk, because it is his former team. Even if 10 years from now he's going to consider himself a Bearcat and a Mountaineer, right now the Mountaineers are the enemy. Or Neil Meyer of Front Office News, WV Sports Now, previewing West Virginia at Cincinnati, a big game. 4-4 West Virginia, 5-3 Cincinnati, and they have the same conference record. Now, looking at this matchup, Cincinnati likes to run the football. You mentioned a quarterback who has composure there that maybe could control the offense. West Virginia's had issues under center, despite a lot of hype and Garrett Green coming in the year, but all his mistakes have been problems for West Virginia. Granted, Nico Marchio going to start this game with the Green injury. So having a stabilization at quarterback's a big deal. They want to run. West Virginia wants to run. They want to try to stop the run. West Virginia's pass defense is a major problem this year that has led to losses, but also Cincinnati has a weakness there on the pass defense, barely in the top 100 in the country. That could lead to problems for Nico to pick things apart. What's a key for you in this matchup? Because it seems like, as much as it could be close, these are similar teams, it also seems like this might breed a game that the winner pulls away. And I would not be shocked if either West Virginia or Cincinnati wins this game by multiple scores, just because there's weaknesses they could take advantage of.
Yeah, no, most certainly, Mike. And I think the two biggest things for Cincinnati in this game is, one, you have to defend the run. You look back at what happened last year. West Virginia ran for nearly 450 yards of total offense last season, and that was a veteran-led defensive line between the likes of Dante Corleone, Malik Van, Eric Phillips, and a couple others last season. But this season, they have done a great job at stopping the run versus big-time running backs, whether that's R.J. Harvey, Taj Brooks, a couple Cam Scatterbo. They held him under 100 yards versus Arizona State. So Cincinnati, the biggest importance is going to be stopping the run. You kind of know what you're going to get with Jaheim White and C.J. Donaldson there for West Virginia, two different style backs. Jaheim White is very effective in the passing game as well, while C.J. Donaldson is your back where he's going to try to go through people. But the biggest thing for Cincinnati is you physically have to stop the run. Now, whether that's guys like Jared Bartlett, I think Dante Corleone could have a huge impact on this game, just like he does any other game.
I think more so this year, too, because he doesn't have to worry about Zach Frazier.
Yes.
Zach Frazier won that battle last year. NFL scouts were at that game because they were scouting the battle between two NFL prospects. They all left the press box saying Zach Frazier got the dub, and you see what he's doing in the NFL. He's gone, and West Virginia has a problem at center this year. They've had problems with snaps this year. I'm sure you've seen the offensive line has not been in what it was a year ago, even though it's been kind of good overall outside of Brandon Yates at center. But Zach Frazier being gone, I feel like Corleone's probably salivating because his kryptonite is gone.
Yeah, no, most definitely. And I think this is a good opportunity for Dante Corleone. I really do. I mean, you look at, unless West Virginia plays him like how Colorado played him where he was facing a triple team the whole night. Yeah. I mean, it's hard to get through a triple team. But right. Overall, I mean, Dante Corleone is going to draw a lot of attention. Everybody knows that. But it could free up opportunities for Jake Golday, Jared Bartlett, Eric Phillips, Darian Varner off the edge, the reserve, Cam Rutherford. It's going to open opportunities, and I think everybody knows that. But another big thing for Cincinnati, Mike, too, is you got to finish your tackles. Cincinnati is 0-4 this season when they have 15 or more missed tackles. And, I mean, look at that this season. That's been the difference maker. They couldn't finish tackles versus Texas Tech. Leads to a game on the road where they could have gotten the big road victory, but they fall just short. Yeah. Then Colorado, you couldn't even finish the tackle in Colorado because offense was struggling to get going at times, but you're looking at the kind of style offense that Colorado runs. It's a spread out offense with some of the best wide receivers in the Big 12, not only the Big 12 and all of college football between the likes of Jimmy Horn and Travis Hunter. So overall, you got to find ways to wrap people up. You can't let the explosive plays happen because that was the difference maker in the Colorado game 2 weeks ago was you get stopped on 4th and 1. And then the very next play, Colorado comes and hits you with the 40-yard touchdown bomb, not even 30 seconds later on the first play to Travis Hunter. You got to find ways to limit the explosives and make clean tackles. If Cincinnati can make the clean tackles, I think this could be a game in their favor. But if they allow West Virginia to slip some tackles and get those explosive plays, it could be different. But I truly expect Saturday to be a shootout, Mike. I really do.
Yeah, and I actually think so too. And I think it's going to be more of one with Nico under center. And I do think there's a higher ceiling in terms of overall quarterback to quarterback. Certainly 2023 Garrett Green is better than 2024 Nico Marchiol, but we haven't seen 2023 Garrett Green. This Garrett Green this year has been making more mistakes, and Cincinnati may get a little bit off, maybe catch a break, kind of because Green is more of a runner. So you mentioned stopping the run, and that was a big problem last year in the matchup. Green's faster. He's the fastest guy on the field. He's more of a runner than Nico. But Nico can scramble a little bit. But Nico showed against Arizona that he's going to try for big plays. They're going to try for big plays with him. They wouldn't have last year when they kind of condensed the offense when he was in there. And Traylon Ray, those guys, I would expect West Virginia to try for a big play early in this game, whether it be first or second possession, whether they get the ball or not. And they're also a team that if they win the coin toss, they want the ball right away. So I would expect that West Virginia kind of is in a mindset now. They got to outscore teams. They're going to try for big plays. So that puts a lot of pressure on the secondaries for both of these two teams. Everyone who's a West Virginia fan knows the Mountaineer secondary has been bad, has been awful, has sucked. There's really nothing else to say. It's not been good enough. There's now a new DC. I don't know if the personnel can change. Aubrey Burke still can't get on the field. It's rough. I imagine Cincinnati is going to score points and try to take advantage of it through the air. Do you think Cincinnati's secondary, though, that has not been nationally as made fun of, but also isn't really ranked as they're doing that well, can handle West Virginia's potential for big plays, can play well enough to allow Cincinnati to win what you're expecting to be a shootout?
Yeah, no, I most certainly do, Mike. And the reason I say that is because you look down in the Big 12, Cincinnati leads the conference in forced fumbles and fumble recoveries. And I think on Saturday, we see one of them, whether that's a forced fumble and a recovery or an interception. I think they see at least one or two turnovers from West Virginia. And I truly say that because the way this defense has been playing, you kind of don't know what to expect. They didn't get the turnover versus Colorado, but heading into that, they were averaging 2 turnovers a game at one point during a 3-game stretch. And Antoine Peak Jr. is a guy that stands out in the secondary. He has a knack defining the football just like his father did during his career at UC. So overall, if Cincinnati can come away and get those opportunities like they did on the road versus UCF per se, where you get 2 opening turnovers in the first 3 possessions. If you capitalize on it, I think so. But this is a defense where I don't know how many times West Virginia has seen the 3-3-5 this season, obviously Iowa State, but the 3-3-5 confuses a lot of people. I mean, we saw it in the Pitt game where Eli Holstein gets the team into the red zone on the first drive and then doesn't see the high safety, and Josh Minkins gets a red zone interception on the first pass play of the game. So overall, I think this 3-3-5 could cause some problems, especially with the scheme and how they scheme things up, but it's going to be interesting. But I think the defense for Cincinnati gets the better of this one just because of how poor West Virginia's defense has been this year. And to say the least, I mean, they've been one of the worst defenses in all of college football, which led to Jordan Leslie being let go. So now, but you don't know what to expect from West Virginia's defense now, especially with the new DC, with Jordan Coots or Jonathan Coots. I don't know.
Jeff Coons.
Yeah. So I really don't know what to really expect from them on the defensive side because you had 2 weeks to prepare. So do they change the scheme or do they stick with the scheme that was working and try to keep that scheme and dial things up? Not like it was really working in the first place, but it's going to be interesting to see, do they change personnel halfway through the year?
Yeah, if you're going to make a decision like that, having the bye week is the best case scenario because you do have time to administer new things. Jeff Coons did say he's going to try to, make things better. They need to be more consistent. They haven't been, obviously, this year. You can't change the personnel. I don't think it's going to look incredibly different or be this catastrophic change in system. He's still a Jordan Leslie disciple. But I think something also that's lost, I mean, West Virginia's defense has been horrendous this year, one of the worst in the country. But the pass rush has actually been good. TJ Jackson, some of those transfer ads, they've been able to actually generate a pass rush. So that's another thing I would think to look at. If West Virginia can generate a pass rush and get to the quarterback, that could help out the secondary and make it a rough day at the office for Cincinnati offensively. That's really the best case scenario for the Mountaineers, is to generate that pass rush, stop the run, and the secondary is just going to be what it is. But make it where there's not as much time to throw that ball and look for the open receivers. The pass rush has actually been good, even though all the other ranks are bad. But we will definitely see, because West Virginia is going to try for big plays. They're going to think they can sneak it by Cincinnati's secondary and that defense. And I'm sure Cincinnati's watching film saying, wow, we're going to throw it every play because that secondary is not good. So we will see what happens. I imagine points are going to be on the board to get you out of here, Neil. It sounds like you think Cincinnati's going to win this game. What is your pick? What is your score prediction for this? And is there anything else about this matchup that you want fans from either side to keep an eye on?
Yeah, so obviously for the big thing on Cincinnati's aspect of this, as you mentioned, the offensive line is fully healthy. Obviously, there was a lot of uncertainty leaving the Colorado game after Luke Kandra got carted off. So it sounds like he's trending in the right direction to play. Gavin Gerhardt also got banged up, so it sounds like he's trending to play as well after we saw both of them go through practice on Tuesday. So Cincinnati's offensive line is fully healthy, and for maybe the third time this whole season where they've had 1 through 5 tackle to tackle completely be your starters. I think that's going to be a huge thing to keep an eye on. But I think the biggest thing for Cincinnati is, and it's going to be a key piece for their successes, you're going to see a big day from Joe Royer, I feel like. This is a game where he could finish with 7 catches, 70 yards, and a touchdown. Realistically, I think he can make a big impact on this game. But it all depends on what Brendan Sorsby and this offensive line does versus a very talented defensive line. But I got this one going, Mike, 34-27 in favor of the Bearcats.
Okay, and that would be points. That would be Cincinnati covering the spread. I believe it's around 4.5.
It's 4.5 now.
Yeah, and I saw it opened up around 3.5, 4. Kind of makes sense. It almost feels like if the game was in Morgantown again, it might open up similar, maybe a little, maybe 2.5, 3, but maybe flip to favor the West Virginia Mountaineers. So it is favoring Cincinnati. That would cover the spread, and I think it also I think this game kind of will fall in which team wins the turnover battle. It sounds really easy to say. You mentioned you think Cincinnati is going to win. You think they're going to get a couple turnovers in this game and have a receiver explode. If West Virginia wins, I imagine Traylon Ray is going to catch a big play or so. I imagine they're going to get an interception or so because they were getting those against Arizona. They struggled to get them in that opening stretch of the season where they're losing all the big games. They were not getting turnovers. If you reflect back on 2023 for the Mountaineers, they were getting turnovers. Beanie Bishop had 4 interceptions and was a consensus All-American, and you see what he's doing with the Steelers. That player, that ability to flip the field has not been there for the Mountaineers this year. So if they can get turnovers, then maybe they win. I do think this is just like this is a Neil Brown thing to do. That when there's billboards, you got to would make a run. I kind of do think West Virginia gets this win, even though they are on the road. But I would not be surprised at all if Cincinnati takes the W. I have this more as a closer game, maybe a 32-30 type of thing. I do think we both kind of have the same neighborhood score-wise, and it may come down to better quarterback play, taking care of the football, who wins the battle of the trenches, and turnovers. Kind of the same story for every matchup and every level of football. But, Neil, I appreciate the time for sure. I'll be seeing you in the press box there, and we're going to get an entertaining game. I honestly do feel, regardless of which one of these two teams wins. I think this is going to be an entertaining game, and points are going to be on the scoreboard.
Yeah, no, most certainly. I definitely think we'll see some points tomorrow. It's gonna be a good crowd from what we're hearing. So overall points being scored, and Cincinnati is also worth noting they're 3-1 at Nippert Stadium this season, with the only loss coming to Pitt. So realistically, they should be 4-0 at home this season. But the fourth quarter blunder there. But overall, it should be a good environment. And I'm excited for this matchup. Obviously, a former Big East rivalry, and West Virginia has dominated this rivalry for many years. So
yeah, 17-3 is the all-time series in favor of West Virginia. They have the longest streak. They did win the last matchup. Obviously, most of that is not Big 12, except for last year. And the Big East days have the connection. I mean, Neil Brown talked about that. This is the chance to have an in-conference rival. If you have rivals, arguably too many of them, but this is the chance to have an in-conference rival, and I think Cincinnati would kind of even like to have one. Unfortunately, they didn't convince the conference, though, because right now they don't play every year. But Neil Brown did publicly say that they should play every year, and I see a lot of hype for Cincinnati going into this game. They're kind of kicking it back old school, celebrating their history, probably not wanting to celebrate too many of the past West Virginia matchups. But we'll see, because this is an important game for both seasons. And both teams are coming off a bye. That's not always the case either. A lot on the line, I feel like, for the vibes of both of these two programs. And the weirdness is these two programs have really controlled a lot of the college football landscape, because if Cincinnati and West Virginia both held on and beat Pitt, Pitt never would have been ranked this year. And either Cincinnati or West Virginia would have probably eventually got a ranking, and that might have totally changed the vibes around Neil Brown, certainly, if he would have gotten the AP poll at some point and at least beat Pitt. But the reality is West Virginia blew the game again in the brawl. Cincinnati blew the game in the brawl. West Pitt was able to win games besides SMU. Pitt got the ranking, and West Virginia and Cincinnati did not. But they're still very much alive in the Big 12 race. So, Neil, I appreciate the time, though, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys for having me. This has been a blast.
Yeah, man. We'll definitely be talking again sometime soon. Neil Meyer there of Front Office News with Rivals. They now are the Rivals site covering the Cincinnati Bearcats. I will be joining him in the Nippert Stadium press box tomorrow, since you are now watching this live, as West Virginia travels to Cincinnati to get that Big 12 matchup on the road and maybe keep this a rivalry, regardless of how often they play in the Big 12. Make this something the fans care about. And I think to make the fans care, you got to have a competitive game. Last year it was not. West Virginia had that game on lock all the way through. Neil and company didn't even think they had a chance when they got in the press box. They kind of knew it was a loss. This is more of an up and down game, and up in the air game, a game that I don't think either one of us would be shocked if went the other way in this game. A big deal to both programs. They did disappointing losses. Pitt commonly to both programs this year, of course. The years could even be better, and West Virginia's is disappointing overall. Cincinnati kind of maybe above expectations this year, doing what maybe West Virginia did a year ago. They're almost the 2023 Mountaineers to what Cincinnati's been this year, and can complete that journey with wins like over WVU, where if you don't get it, maybe you're even less than that. But we will see on the field. Jared Bartlett is another extra story to this as well. Nico Marchiol is part of that. If Nico plays well, and again, how do you bench him even if Green gets healthy? Cincinnati does avoid Garrett Green and their kind of issue with Green, and Zach Frazier obviously no longer there. They don't have to worry about Frazier in the matchup with Corleone. So a lot of arrows do point to the Bearcats, but again, I do think Nico plays well enough. He plays a lot smarter, more careful with the football. There's less likely going to be turnovers in favor of Cincinnati. If Green was playing, I definitely would say a couple go the Bearcats' way and they win this. I weirdly have more confidence in Nico right now, and I would never have said that going into the season. And I do think West Virginia gets this win and embarks on a year that's polarizing to the fans, and maybe some fans don't even want to win these games, because if you win 7-8 and crawl in and win a bowl, they're not firing Neil Brown, even though the fan base certainly wants him gone. We will see what happens, though, I don't know if I'd bet on this, but based on Neil's prediction there, that would cover the spread. It is, 4.5 right now, I believe, with Cincinnati at home, depending on your sports book. Most major sports books are in that direction. West Virginia has been able to buck a sports book before. Almost all last season was against a sports book. So it can happen, but if Cincinnati wins and they win comfortably, that wouldn't surprise me either. I do think this comes down to the winning team is going to get a turnover or two, probably score off that turnover, at least on the ensuing drive. And the quarterback's going to have to play clean football. You're going to have to win the battle of O-line versus D-line. There can't be the snap issues that have just really surrounded Brandon Yates' season. There cannot be the snap issues to make life even harder on Nico Markiel. But if you can do it to Arizona, maybe you can do it to Cincinnati. Cincinnati is a better team, a better defense. They're going to score more. Arizona's offense couldn't really hang until the end. And if West Virginia loses this game, then all the thoughts of, well, they just beat bad teams. Not only can they not beat great teams and just contend with average teams, but they only really beat bad teams. The average teams, the similar teams to them, they're also going to lose to. And then instead of having this chance to win 4 in a row, they could lose 4 in a row, and the fan base will be out on Brown even more. And even though I do think the program wants to keep him and they won't make the decision until the offseason, they lose 4 straight. That may force Ren Baker's hand more than any billboard ever could. So there might be fans who want that, and that maybe could happen. We're going to kind of see the story of these last 4 games and how they perform in this one. A win over the Bearcats, you never know, at least the rest of this year in terms of how the year will end, even though it's obviously still being disappointing and will be viewed as disappointing overall. A loss in this one, and I don't even know if players are going to be bought in. Fans won't care about next week. Fans will go in from 0% trust the Brown into negative numbers. The attendance will be really, really bad for the home game. Doesn't matter what happens in the Big 12, even if everybody loses and you're still on the graphic, the fans aren't going to be caring about it. But a win, maybe you budge into that and at least get a home crowd. You never know. Neil Brown then could argue that all our ranked games were the beginning of the season, and once we get into teams that weren't ranked, we're at least winning those. So it's not a step in the right direction or forward from 2023, but it's at least not a step back. Give us more time, all of that you're going to roll your eyes on because it is year 6. But if they lose these, then it's a step back, and then the bottom probably has fallen out if it hasn't already, and maybe that would then force things with Ren Baker. Thanks to Neil Meyer here on Front Office News, again, now covering the Bearcats within the Rivals family. And I will definitely see him at the Nipper Stadium press box, so look forward to that. We got a long drive ahead of us here. We're going to be doing it early in the morning. Cody Nesper and I will make the trip and cover this game on the road, get another road game covered. So no post-game show, but we will have a lot of coverage for you at WV Sports Now, as we'll be in Cincinnati for the coverage. And we will enjoy, I think, a high-scoring matchup. We will enjoy some Skyline chili. So win, lose, or draw, we're going to have some fun there in Cincinnati, Ohio. But nonetheless, it's an important game. It's been a disappointing year, but this is an important game for West Virginia, for Neil Brown, for everybody involved. For Nico Markiel, does this ignite a quarterback controversy? That might be fun to cover and fun to ask about. If Nico plays well and West Virginia wins, you never know. But maybe they don't. Maybe what Neil's saying comes true. Maybe it's 2 or 3 picks. Maybe it's defensive scores. Maybe Cincinnati's doing way too much. Maybe Nico doesn't look any better. And maybe Green comes in, but it doesn't matter because West Virginia loses. You just never know, but we're going to find out tomorrow at noon at Nipper Stadium. West Virginia, Cincinnati, another installment in a potential Big 12 in-conference rivalry, but a historic rivalry and an all-time rivalry that West Virginia has absolutely owned.